This is Pamela Gropey Art, and today we are going to paint a simple fall tree using sponges. Well, brushes and sponges. But this is just one of those dollar store cheapy sponges that I have torn into pieces. And how I do that is I take the full sponge. I'll go ahead and put this into a smaller piece, maybe this one. And I just cut a nip in it. And then I tear it, and then it has these jagged edges and the sponge texture that you want to have in your tree. But this is just one of those, I don't know, foam sponges. I don't know what they're called exactly. I just know you can get them at, or I did at Dollar Tree or Dollar Store. I've had these and have been using them for over 10 years, so they last forever. So a couple sponges should do you. I also have them in different sizes. Like if I have a small pattern I'm doing, I'll use a smaller piece. So that's how the sponges are made. Now I'm going to go in, and this is a canvas I had another painting on that I didn't like. I just went over it with a neutral, it's kind of a gray. And let's put in our background for our tree. I want it to be a very light background, and the background is just going to be that in the back. So I'm not going to have much detail. I just want it to be background. And that's warm white, and I'm just putting out, what is this one? This one's coastal blue. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this out. I don't want there to be a lot of blue. I just want there to be a touch, and that needed to be blended, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and blend it with the brush on here. So I'm just going to stroke up and down and cover the underpainting with the streaked warm white and blue. And we want the streaks, so pull it all the way down, all the way up, and don't over blend it. That's very easy to do. This is the 2-inch low Cornell white nylon brush that I like for doing mini backgrounds. I get it on Amazon. And if you feel it's too blue, you can go back in with some more warm white. Add more warm white. Go around the edges as you please. And then let it dry. Now this one, I think it's fine. I'm not going to overthink it because the tree covers a good portion of the background. So I just wanted to put in some color, and mostly a light color, because I want the tree and the foliage to stand out. Now this is going to be a fall tree, and the beauty of that is this hint of blue will contrast well with the yellows and oranges. It'll just create a complement. So let's let this dry, and I'll come back and we'll start on the tree. So the background, still, it's cool, but it's dry. I got a little spot of water there, and I have my 3/4 inch flat. You can use whatever flat brush that works for you. Here's burnt umber on my palette. And this is like bark brown. These are plaid folk art colors, but use what colors you have. Burnt umber is a pretty straightforward color, and it's a great dark brown, a basic. I had just put the bark brown out here because I didn't think I had enough of the burnt umber, but it'll all work. So I'm just going to kind of trace an outline of my tree trunk. This is not absolute. I'm just getting the idea in there. So you notice how I'm kind of Ying out here, and then I am creating some V's for branches to kind of come off of the main trunk. And I'm not going to get too carried away because the foliage will cover the majority of it, and I'm just going to pull in with the flat of my brush. When I was drawing with the chisel edge, and I'm just putting in that dark brown color. But that's all right. This is just a basic little tree. So I'm pulling the colors And one thing about adding the bark brown, since it's a little bit lighter, you're going to get striations of color, which gives dimension to your tree. And then you can kind of dip in the light, the camel, the tan color, and just pull in some lighter color as you see fit. Now you see I'm not completely finishing these straight edged. That's because, as I said, the foliage is going to come up, and having a raggedy edge underneath is just fine. So this is just a very simple tree that you can paint. You can have it be straight up and down. You don't have to have it Y out at the bottom. And in fact, later on I'll show you how you can fix that if you don't like the wide bottom. So here's our tree trunk. So we've got the various colors in there, just streaking it in. If you want to let this dry, you can dry brush in some texture. But I'm not going to get too carried away with details on this. There's so many ways you can do this. And that the striations here are great. If you wanted to get, while this is drying, I'll show you one little thing. I said I wasn't going to get too detailed, but I'll show you a little trick. I'm getting some licorice black out here, and I'm getting a liner brush, and you can bring in like a little faint knot, like if there was a knot here and you come around like you're faux painting, like there's a hole in the tree, and just add a little streak, just a little added cool detail. And if you don't like it, now I have a whole faux, whoops, I got it in black, I didn't want the black, faux background, faux wood background tutorial that you can create a whole background that looks like boards. You see how that just brushes out. So just play with it, have fun, and enjoy. So there's your basic trunk. Super easy. Let it go, let it be rough, because wood is rough. All right, let's let this dry and then we'll continue on. So we're going to add just a few more thinner branches off of these branches, just because some may show through the background of the foliage. So you want in the behind the leaves, you might see a hint of these branches. So there's that. We'll let these dry, or we'll dry them with the blow dryer. We'll hit it really quick, and then we'll bring in our foliage. So here we go. I've got my colors, my foliage colors on my palette. This is Pueblo. It's a terracotta russet color, pure orange, yellow ochre, moon yellow, daffodil yellow. And I'm going to start with one of my sponge pieces. And I'm going to start with the darkest color, which is this russety terracotta color. And I'm pouncing into the paint and then bouncing off some of the color. I don't want it too opaque. And I'm going to start real light because I want to see the texture. I don't want pure solid color. I'm going to move the sponge around, and I'm going to put in that terracotta color. Now this is the back color, and what I mean by back is the first color. Some of the other colors are going to go over it. I should say the other colors. And I'm going to work from the darkest, dullest color forward. So there's the terracotta. I've got a little bit more I want to put in there. Put some in the center. Bring some down into the canopy. It's going to come down. And you see how it thins out as it works itself out of the sponge. That's great. You want that texture, etc. Some are thicker, some are thinner. Now let's go into the next color. I do not have to rinse out or get a different brush sponge because this is pretty well worked itself out. So now I'm going to go into the pure orange. do the same as far as loading it and then offloading it. And then you tap in that pure orange. You can go over a little bit of the terracotta, but you don't want to obscure it completely. Go around the edges if you want. Bring it some down. Whoops, I got into some, oh, I tapped into the wet white that was on the side. Not a big deal. Some will come over the trunk a little bit, some foliage. And again, once the orange is kind of played out on there, you can either get more if you want more of the bright orange, or you can go towards the yellow. I want some more orange on those limbs. You see how the limbs are starting to go backwards into the background. Now, I still got too much orange in that sponge, and I want the yellows to be more pure, meaning just the yellow color. So I'm going to get a clean, dry sponge. I'm going to do the same as far as pinching it with my fingers. Now, you will get paint on your fingernails. It comes off pretty easy, so no big deal. I'm going to start with the yellow ochre, which is the darkest, dullest yellow, and then I'm going to start bringing in the yellow. Walk it around. Some of the orange may pick up, but it shouldn't pick up too much if you put it on lightly, as I recommend. And you see how it's coming together? You get the fall color. You see the limbs behind the foliage. You also have a little bit of the sky showing through. Now the choice is yours if you want to have more sky or less sky. If you want this to be a full, thick tree with no foliage showing through, that is your choice. So again, I got into the white around the edge. So I'm going to pounce that off because I'm not sure I want to bring that in. I pounced it off on a towel to kind of get it out of the sponge, or you can go to a new sponge. Those big sponges make quite a few pieces. I am going into the moon yellow now. That's the medium yellow color. That's the orange sponge. That's why that's there. And I'm pouncing it off a little bit. I have a little more yellow in here than I did the other colors, but I'm just going to go in lightly, press lightly, lightly, so you don't put down too much paint. Go over the limbs a bit. You do want some showing through, so don't try to obscure your limbs completely. And you see how it's all coming together? Now, if you think you have enough medium yellow, go ahead and tap into the daffodil yellow. The daffodil is the lightest. I didn't get a different sponge, but you could. It's staying pretty pure. And go in with some bright, bright color that just pops. Again, be random. Go around your tree and put in your brightest yellow. It'll thin out as you work. That's fine. Then bring that down into your lower portion. Now, here's where you need to make a decision. You can continue, you can let it be more quite airy, or you can actually, if you want this to be thick foliage, you don't want as much as that sky showing through, come back in and work in more orange. I'll get the sponge, pull in more orange to really obscure that sky. And the amount of oranges and yellows you want is just that. It's what you want. You want less of the limbs showing through? That's just fine. And you see I filled it up. The foliage is going off of the canvas. Do you want more of the golden yellow? Put more golden yellow in there. You see how it's creating more opacity as I lay on more of the fall colors. And so how much orange, how much yellow, the depth of the colors. If you want to use pastel colors in these shades for a fall tree, that's fine too. Also here, our dogwood trees has a lot of burgundy in it. Do you want to bring in some burgundy in your trees? This is berry wine, and I'll show you how that plays out. Now normally I'm going to get a fresh sponge again, so I don't dilute it with the yellow. Now this is totally optional. You can stick with the oranges and yellows if you like, but here is some berry wine, and I'm going to bring that color in, and you see how that really provides some drama. Just bring in, and it really changes up that tone of the whole painting. And if you feel like you get too much in there, you can put it to the background with more oranges and yellows over top. But you can see how that burgundy wine, or berry wine, I keep wanting to say burgundy wine, really sets another tone with the tree. Not too hard, is it? So let me see. I've got some yellows on here. I'm going to go ahead and just show you how you can put that more to the background if it's too wine-ish. So play around with it. Find a direction you want to go and just enjoy. So let's, do around the base a little bit. So let's say I didn't like the way this played out. It's very easily fixed or changed. Now you could go in like with some greens. Let's see, I've got sap green here, and use the sponges, or you can use a brush. But I'm going to start with the sponge to sponge in some green, and you can just sponge it on there and leave some of the trunk showing. Don't get rid of the whole trunk, and just sponge it in there, a little mound of grass or whatever you want to call it. And you could do this with the yellows if you wanted to stay with the autumn tones. And then I'm going to use my brush, and I'll use some of the sap green and a lighter green. I love citrus green, but you could use fresh foliage. And I'm double loading my brush. Oops, I'm flinging paint. I'm double loading my brush. I had a little bit of sap left. Double load, make sure it has a nice chisel edge, and then just bring in some grassy tufts. And if you want to use a smaller brush, you're more comfortable with it, then you can use a smaller brush. Now, I want you to note that when you're doing this, you have a double-loaded brush. The color you're trailing with will be your predominant color. You see how the dark is trailing, and then when I flip the brush and make the citrus green trailing, that is the predominant color. So just a little trick for that. You could also use a brush and just dab in colors. I would start the same way. You start with the same routine of the darker colors. I'm just getting out some color here. I'd already put my paints all away before I thought to share this with you. But I just load my brush. This is the 3/4 inch flat. You could use whatever color or size brush you want, and you just dab in splotches. This is very impressionistic. You're not doing leaves, you're not doing, certain shapes, and then as you build layers, you have the same different color tones, etc., like you do with the sponge. Now also, if you wanted to come in and define some of the trunk, like you want a little piece of trunk coming through the paint, or the foliage I should say, go ahead and do that. Just put some in. I'm going a little overboard here just to show you, but you just drag in some more of the brown. And if you want to double load, so you have two tones, see how it's double loaded with the color, and you just pull in, turn your brush as whatever color you want dominant to bring in some of the trunks or limbs. And that is how you do it with a brush. You put the foliage in with a brush instead of a sponge. I just like the unique texture of the sponge, but the paintbrush style is also very neat and interesting when you just dab it in there impressionistically. So the trunk is mostly dry. If you want to see how you can dry brush in some like texture, I have a tiny bit of the camel on my brush. I think it has too much moisture in it, but it's basically very lightly loaded, and you just barely drag your brush, barely drag, and you see how you can see the streaks of color, and that creates some texture. And bark has a lot of texture, and if you wanted to add a hint of black, same thing, work some black in there. I still have some of the camel in, and you just streak it on very, very lightly where your paint's almost dry on your brush, and you just bring that little bit of texture into your trunk. And that is a basic fall tree. Also on my website, I have how to paint aspens, and there is a vintage truck with pumpkins fall tutorial that has trees in it done with sponges as well, and I turned them into aspens. So check those out if you want, and enjoy your basic fall tree painting tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this quick and easy video, and join me next time for a new painting lesson.